I call this meeting to order. This is the regular meeting of the Northfield Public School Board. Today is Monday, May 11, 2020, and the time is 7:00 p.m. Due to the current federal and state emergency declarations, the Minnesota Directive for Residents to Stay at Home and guidance about limiting person-to-person contact due to the COVID-19 pandemic, this meeting is being conducted via video conference in accordance with Minnesota State Statute 13D.021. In addition, the school board has determined that it's not feasible for at least one board member or the superintendent to be physically present at the regular meeting location, and that it is not feasible for the public to attend this meeting at the regular location. The district did make accommodations for public comment, which I will outline when we get to that part of the agenda. Welcome board meetings, and to those who are board members and to those who are observing the meeting via our live stream broadcast. Procedurally, we will conduct the meeting using the same format as we did for our April 13 and April 27 teleconference board meetings. We will begin by taking board members' attendance by roll call. Anita Ozzie will call the name of each board member in alphabetical order by last name. When your name is called, respond by saying present. Anita?
Present, but you're muted, Anita.
Thank you, Tom. Hurwitz,
Present.
Hardy,
Present.
Iverson,
Present.
Pritchard,
Present.
Quinnell,
Present.
Stratmon,
Present.
Excellent. Also present at the video conference board meeting tonight are Dr. Hillman, District Superintendent, Anita Ozzie, Dr. Hillman's Administrative Assistant, and Erin Bailey, the district's Director of Community Education. Board members are asked to mute their microphone when they are not speaking. During the course of the meeting, when a motion and a second is required, Dr. Hillman will initiate the unmute for all board members. At the start of each discussion, as chair, I will call on each board member in alphabetical order by last name for any questions or comments. If you don't wish to speak, you are welcome to pass. I will conduct one round of questioning for board members. If board members have follow-up question or comments, consider using the raise hand feature in order to be recognized by the chair. All votes on items for individual action will be conducted by roll call by Anita Ozzie. Each board member should wait until their name is called before voting. This meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Access to the recording will be posted to the district website as soon as possible. So with that, we can move ahead. Dr. Hillman, there were a few items in the table file.
Yes, in this evening's table file, you had an attachment for the financial update, and we also had several personnel items for the consent grouping.
Okay, thank you. If there's no objection, we will add these items to the agenda as we move forward. Is there a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
Motion.
Moved
Second.
by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Amy. We have a motion and a second. Anita will do a roll call vote to approve the agenda. Anita?
Baraniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Excellent. Motion carries. The agenda is approved. We will move on now to public comment. This is an opportunity for residents, property and business owners, parents, employees, and students of the Northfield Public School District to address the board. To accommodate the public comment portion of our meeting, we made available on the district's website the ability for the public to submit feedback to the board via email by 5 p.m. today. All submissions that follow the district policy regarding public comment would be read by myself, board chair, at this time. There were no public comments submitted for this board meeting. So we will move on to announcements and recognitions. Dr. Hillman.
And this evening, we have no announcements or recognitions.
Okay, we will move on then to our items for discussion. The first item is the COVID-19 distance learning update and district operations. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, I want to share with you a few things tonight. As you know, in the first COVID-19 distance learning and school district operations board update, we focused on the distance learning plan and the plans and how the early days of distance learning was going in early April. Last time I focused on our staff survey results that were completed after the first 2 weeks. Gave you a little bit of a preview of the results from just a couple of questions of the student survey. And this evening, I want to focus on the student survey results. And so I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to walk you through a couple of items from our District Youth Council survey. And the District Youth Council, in conjunction with Director of Assessment Services, Hope Langston, conducted a survey. And they conducted the survey of middle school and high school students. And we had over 939 students total who participated in the survey. The survey was reviewed by Ms. Langston and myself. We also did something we call a data rollout with our District Youth Council, which is of course 16 high school students that Dr. Iverson and I meet with. Right now we're meeting with them every Thursday. During that rollout, we shared the results with them. And then we did the same thing that we do with all of our other survey data in the district. We asked them, what did they think was going on for the areas that were highlighted as positives by the students? And then we asked them for the areas where there was the greatest area for growth. What would those look like if they were to achieve an excellent rating on the Likert scales that were presented? So we had a robust discussion with the District Youth Council. They are doing some additional discussion and are going to be providing Ms. Langston and myself with some other recommendations and suggestions based on their understanding of the data. I want to show you a few of the, you'll notice there's quite a few tabs in this dashboard. I'm going to highlight the overall adjustment. And when we take a look at the overall adjustment of the students, what you're going to see is the green is saying where students felt that they were adjusted. Yellow looking at that they were adjusted but with some difficulty. And red meaning they were struggling to adjust. You'll notice in both middle school and high school that that struggling to adjust grows with each grade level. So the oldest students at the school report the greatest level of struggling to adjust. And some of the discussion that we had with the District Youth Council was around having already had routines and things down at the school. Thus, the longer that you've been there, these changes were a little bit more difficult for students to work with. This was conducted after the 3rd week of distance learning. We're looking at the entire district here. What we'll notice is that there are high levels of students who have said that they had adjusted. And even though some adjusted with some difficulty, we have seen the vast majority of students adjust to the distance learning plan. The next item that I want to share with you is I want to show with you the word bubble that we, or the bubble here, because I think this is a good one to show you too. And so each of these circles indicate, the larger the circle, the more times that a student selected that option to this question. Describe how you feel at the moment regarding distance learning. And when we look across, I'm going to switch it so you can see the entire district, middle school and high school and ALC together. You're going to see that even though students who had adjusted, they were feeling overwhelmed was the top response, followed by supported. So this dichotomy of students feeling overwhelmed, very natural. As we said, we are all beginners when it comes to distance learning for an extended period of time, but we're also happy to see that many students also do feel supported. So we see confident rising to the top as well as anxious. And we have been concerned about making sure that we're continuing to reach out to students who are indicating that they're lonely and are struggling. And so the District Youth Council has also started some distance learning tips that they are going to be sharing through the high school announcements and through the Schoology platform. So these two first slides are things I think are really important to show that our students have been making progress in terms of adjusting to the distance learning period, while at the same time they're feeling a range of emotions around how they have engaged in distance learning. I want to also share with you one of the questions around teacher consistency, because this was a very interesting hypothesis that students had around the consistency in the workload. And I'm going to specifically talk about consistency in communication here. And I'm going to look at both the middle school and the high school. So the District Youth Council had a hypothesis that there was, they were hearing about some inconsistency in communication strategies between their teachers. However, when we look at the data, you're going to see that the vast majority of students responded that their teachers were either very consistent or somewhat consistent. And so that was a really interesting discussion with the District Youth Council, and they have made several suggestions that we'll be sharing with faculty later this spring to discuss how can we use this information moving forward. So while we want to provide autonomy to our teachers, we also know that we have heard from our students and also from families that having a consistent approach to how things are presented in an online format is very helpful. We understand that beyond that initial presentation, teachers will have different ways in which they want to instruct, and they will want students to engage in distance learning strategies. But at least a base level of consistency and communication is something that we have heard from a number of different students through this survey, and also from families. And it's actually something that our faculty is also beginning to understand, that the efficiency of how we present this information to students is really important for them to be able to engage effectively. I'm also going to share with you some COVID-19 analytics dashboard that we have. So again, thanks to Ms. Langston and some of the team from HCI for helping put these various dashboards together. So last time we talked about specifically about attendance. And so in this graph, what you'll notice is that on the left-hand side, the elementary schools, of course, much smaller buildings and typically engaging with one teacher per day, you're going to notice very flat rates of absences. And in fact, these rates tend to be less than what we would have had we been in person. It makes all sorts of sense because especially smaller children are, we call our elementary schools petri dishes, you know, lovingly for a reason. And during this time frame would have been a time where students would have had the end of the cold and flu season, plus students who are leaving for appointments and things like that are obviously substantially reduced. You'll also notice that we have our attendance for our middle school students, and as I hover over every date, you're going to see how many students were reported absent that day. And at our high school, you'll notice that this is a very different graph, and part of that is because that includes one or more periods at the high school. So attendance at the high school is taken by period, and so if one student misses an entire day, that counts as 7 absences. You'll also notice that they have a different piece in these drop-offs on Fridays, when Fridays are self-directed, and they are times for students to be engaging with their teachers for any work that they miss. So we've seen less reported absences on Fridays. 2 other ways that we are gauging engagement in our distance learning strategy is by looking at some reports out of our 2 main distance learning platforms, Schoology and Seesaw. So this is Schoology, which is mostly used with our secondary students. It is also used, there's a mix of both Schoology and Seesaw at grades 4 and 5. What you're going to notice is that we're looking here at the Schoology unique daily viewers. And so as we look at very consistent at the middle school, 964 students roughly, you're going to see that that's very consistent. You also see quite a bit of consistency at the high school, you know, with over 1,200 individual students checking in each day. At the bottom, you're going to see the different kinds of sessions, and you're going to notice that there was more sessions to begin with, and then you'll see that we have flattened out as time has gone along, and you'll see dips and peaks and valleys, and part of that is how our teachers have learned to present information to their students, not something where they're getting brand new things every day. And so we attribute that to being some of these peaks and valleys. But I share this with you so that you know that we are looking at this data and we are doing the best that we can to make sense of it and understand some of these patterns as part of our distance learning period. I'm going to also show you a Seesaw. Now Seesaw is a little bit different because what we're counting here are the number of items posted. And at the top here, what we're looking at is the number of items posted by the school staff. And so you'll see again, starting very slow at the beginning, peaking, and then this is around the time we got some parent feedback. As I mentioned to you, there was about a quarter of our elementary families who felt we were doing a little too much. And so you're going to notice how that is starting to level off, and we're finding what that rhythm is. Longfellow This is key. It's smaller numbers, obviously, because those are pre-K students and their families. Now at the bottom, you'll also see some consistency, better consistency here in the student postings. And so you'll notice that, again, not every student is having to post something every single day. And so you'll notice the level of postings there. We've got a couple of other items that I want to report as part of our distance learning report this time. I'm going to go to the second part of our page here. And what I want to share with you is just a couple of pieces here. I've got the report on the screen talking about some modification to the end of the year distance learning schedule. We had a lot of feedback about, are we going to make sure that if we think about that last week of school, it's a very different schedule to begin with. There are usually quite a few field trips. There's also various other concluding activities that happen at both the middle school and the elementary schools. And of course, traditionally, we have a finals week at the high school to end the year. There will be no high school finals this year as we have traditionally seen them. So what I want to share with you is that during that final week of school, the existing distance learning schedule will go through May 29th. And after May 29th, there won't be any new instruction and there won't be any new assignments that week. That week is going to be used for a lot of the traditional similar kinds of things that are done at the end of the year when we are face-to-face. There's going to be some departures as well. So all of our elementary teachers will be conducting a closing conference with every one of their families during that week. Our middle school and high school teachers will be working with students who have gotten behind in the distance learning environment. And so we have been looking at the data. I've shown you the attendance data. I've shown you the Schoology data. Every week we have a team of people at both the middle school and high school who are looking at that data plus some additional data points. And they are looking at students who have either not engaged that week or who might be behind. They're making personal phone calls. They have reached out to people, knocked on their doors if necessary to make sure that students are remaining engaged. But we know that there are some students who had fallen behind. And so in an effort to make sure that we are giving every student that opportunity to be as successful as they possibly can in this new environment that we're all beginners in, we're going to be using that last week for our high school and middle school teachers to really work with those students who may still need to have some additional assistance to successfully complete the term. Also during that week, we'll be taking some time as a staff to do a very deep dive into our distance learning experience and looking at what are the things that we think did go well based on the data, based upon our shared experiences. If we had to do it over again, what would we do differently? Are there things that we say, knowing what we know after 9 weeks of this, would we do things differently to start? We're also going to be forecasting a little bit to next fall, which of course none of us have any idea what the fall is going to look like. So we're going to be looking at a number of different potential startup options for the fall based upon how we think that this could go. Do we come back full distance learning? Do we come back full face-to-face, which will also require some special thought? It's not going to be just business as usual when we come back face-to-face. Is it some kind of mix to that? Is it a later start than what the traditional just after Labor Day start would be because of the virus, and what kind of flare-ups might be in the second and third rounds of how the virus operates? So we're going to be using the time for that. We're also going to be using some time for some training and some other debriefing about distance learning skills. Specifically, what are the things that we've learned that work really well that we want to ensure we continue using even in a face-to-face environment? We've done a lot of technology integration over the years, but we've never had this depth or this length of time to really see on a day-to-day basis what are the things that work most effectively for students. And so learning what are the things that we do not want to lose. We cannot waste the opportunity that we've had here to have this in-depth learning session for everyone. And what are the things we want to make sure that we carry forward? So I want to share with you that that last week of distance learning will look different than the previous 8 weeks of distance learning, just like the last week of school looks different in a number of different ways for our students in regular school times. Also want to just give you one more update on our emergency childcare and free meals. So we continue to offer Tier 1 emergency and healthcare workers the opportunity for emergency daycare and emergency childcare. We're so thankful to our venture staff and to our many educational assistants who are rotating through the child care center every week, providing excellent care, helping students with their distance learning. And we're averaging right now 52 children per day at Bridgewater. That was the average that I calculated on Thursday. And just want to share with you, since March 30th, we have served over 47,000 meals to students. And so wanted to share a little bit about these things with you tonight. First of all, talking about the student survey at a high level, the District Youth Council worked with us on, talking about the modification to that end of the year distance learning schedule, and then just, of course, an update on the emergency childcare and free meals. I'd be happy to take any questions that people might have.
Okay, thank you. We will go through board members alphabetically, and that will be an opportunity for questions and comments. We'll begin with you, Tom. Questions or comments?
Comment is that I'm totally impressed having 2 kids in school, how well everything has gone and all the work and effort that everybody's put in. It's, like we're 6 weeks into this, and it's like we've done it before. So kudos to everybody. I was just wondering, at the end of it all, when everybody has a chance to just take a breath, would it be helpful to go back to some students and families and get more info, after people that maybe have a chance to reflect on it, to get more feedback from them too?
Yes, we are planning to do some kind of end of the year additional data gathering from folks for exactly that reason. These surveys were taken very early in the term. We've made some modifications to our schedules and to some items based upon that feedback. Again, our overall feedback was, as you said, Tom, has been generally positive, but we know that there's a lot of room for growth. And I think we're saying that it has gone well because we have not done this before. But we know that to continue to get better at this, there are some things that we would really need to look at as we move forward, both from a communications perspective, from staff to student, staff to parent, and then also thinking about some of that consistency, and also thinking a little bit about some of our pedagogy. Some of the reflection that we've had is that we have tried in many cases to replicate what we do during the regular school day. And while things like these Zoom meetings can be very helpful in that, in fact, there was an article in the Star Tribune over the weekend that showed about 60% of families surveyed by the Star Tribune across the Minnesota, I believe it was across the state of Minnesota. I don't know if it was just Metro or across the state, but about 60% of people responding to that survey said it was the right amount of time. Now, that our survey showed a higher percentage of agreement that what we've been doing is a right amount of time, 66% across the district. And at the same time, the Star Tribune reported something very interesting that they found, and of course, it's not a scientific randomized sample survey that the Star Tribune is doing, but they did find a connection between school districts that were doing more live instruction like we have been doing and parent satisfaction. So, but replicating the classroom isn't always the best use in a digital environment. So we're going to continue to look for what's the right balance there between making sure that we have these in-person connections via a video conference and that kind of independent work that students can do, that it does appear to be very meaningful to them as well.
Yeah, and I guess see for older students who maybe have to watch the younger ones, they may do better with pre-recorded sessions where they can do them in the evening. Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Tom. Amy, questions or comments?
Yes. First, I want to thank you and all of the staff and the teachers at the district for really sort of pulling a rabbit out of a hat and making long distance learning work for our students. And it's just been a remarkable situation to watch unfold. And I know a lot of care and work and love went into this to make it as good for the students as possible. I have 2 questions. The first one is about feeding students lunches after the school year ends. Have you heard anything about whether that will continue, or what's up with that?
Yeah, so Amy, the latest update that we have is that in order to provide what we call non-congregate meals, or congregate meals, in order to continue to provide meals in the way that it's non-congregate, the way that we're doing it now at various sites for pickup, there needed to be a special waiver from the federal government. And the federal government, because they run the National School Lunch Program, they did provide a waiver for us to be able to deliver meals like we're doing right now through June 30th. Now, there has not been any extension yet on that particular waiver. There's also a summer lunch program that we've participated in for a number of years. So the current executive order requires us to provide these free meals through the end of our last regularly calendared school day. We plan to do that for sure. Under the current waiver through June 30th, we would be able to continue those meals through June 30th if we were so desire. We are currently looking at the feasibility of that. We are also working with some community organizations should we need to stop the free meal process and have a seamless transition where we've been working with HCI, who is looking at providing some kind of food service for the summer. One of the issues that we have is that even though there's a higher level of reimbursement than we normally would get for meals like this, our most recent analysis is showing right now we are running very close to even, and we are projecting that we will most likely be running this program at a deficit. Now, you know, our child nutrition program has been managed very, very well for years. In fact, it was just a year ago, for several years in a row, where they told us that we had to spend more of the fund balance, which we reinvested in equipment and things like that. However, to be able to remember that at the end of the day, if the child nutrition program were to go into a negative fund balance scenario, our general fund has to pick that up. Now, we know that there's legislation coming. We've been given guidance by the Department of Education that we can use other existing general fund balances to cover some of these kinds of costs, both this and the Emergency Child Care Center. So of course, our hearts would be continuing to do this service for families for as long as we can. However, we also have a responsibility to make sure that we are fiscally responsible in that area as well. So we want to make sure we continue the meals as long as we can. Right now, under the current extension, we could do that through June 30th. The question is going to be, can we continue to get people to work, right? Because they were currently anticipating the end of their employment on June 5th. Our normal summer lunch program only employs 2 or 3 people. It's not to the level of what we are doing here. It's usually through our targeted services programs. So it would be a major undertaking to continue this, and to do so knowing that we would not be coming out even. We are really discussing how can we continue to support our students' food needs with some community partners. We also are hearing there's the possibility that the waiver may be extended. But many Minnesota schools right now, one of our top concerns is some of the short-term financial shortfalls that we will have as a result of these wonderful and morally imperative free meals that we're doing for children, and the Emergency Child Care Center that we're offering at no cost, to those participants. Yet, we are obviously paying all of those staff. We are privileged to do both. However, we have been telling the state for weeks that there is a shelf life to this, of where we can do this in a fiscally responsible manner. And we are going to have to cover, unless there's additional dollars from the state. I'm going to share some federal dollar pieces during our financial update, where we are going to need to use other sources to cover those expenses.
Okay, so at this point, you have a lot of things that are you're juggling with it. And since you have no clear guidance from the government and no extra money, it looks like most likely it's going to end when school ends. Is that what I'm hearing?
We are still reviewing the data and how long we'd be able to do it. We currently could do it through June 30th. We'd love to do it through June 30th, but we are still, number one, we need to make sure we have the people who can do the work, the food service work. We are looking at a number of different models for this, some that are less costly than others. So for example, one model that we are playing out right now and looking at the financial projections of it would be if we went from an everyday service to a twice-a-week service, or on Mondays, for example, this is just a hypothetical, students would get meals for Monday and Tuesday, and a Wednesday service where they get meals for Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. That would reduce the amount of staff time. We'd also have to consolidate the sites, and we would be looking to continue to partner with Benjamin Bus. They've been gracious and not charged us additional for that bus service because of our current bus contract. We understand that they'd also be willing to help us in the summer. So we're looking at a number of things to make sure we could continue that. Right now, there's a stopping point of being able to do it like we are right now at June 30th, unless that's extended. So we're looking at a number of different options to see how long could we do this. while also making sure that we're being fiscally responsible.
Then, thank you for that. And my second question was, you kindly included a very nice article
Yes.
by Ellie Angelotti. And I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about, when I read it, it was very interesting. Is it being published somewhere? How did she get involved? What can you tell us?
So the dashboards that I have shared with you, the ones that I shared with you tonight, the ones I've shared with you in the past, are done using a piece of software called Tableau. Tableau is a data visualization software, and it's a piece of software that we are very fortunate to have through a grant from Northfield Healthy Community Initiatives and the Northfield Promise Initiative. And Hope Langston has been trained, gone to several national trainings as a result of the grant from HCI and Northfield Promise. And Northfield HCI data analyst Austin Bauer, Austin and Hope really work very closely together. And so we've learned that visualizing data can be very powerful. So example, the slide that I showed you with the students' feelings in terms of showing those bubbles that are larger, that's not you can get a graph like that out of Excel, but we are also able to do some linking between Google Forms and Google Sheets and Tableau, so we can have these dashboards that update automatically. For example, the attendance one that you saw, that updates automatically. Last time I showed you a very colorful graph of the food service distribution. That updates every week when the data is implemented. So we've been working with this software for the last couple of years. And when we are looking at some very new problems to solve with distance learning, we use that data visualization. So two of the items that were highlighted in that article was to develop the bus routes that we have for our food service. We did mapping of where we knew that the most free and reduced lunch price students lived within the community. And so we could very much target where should the bus stops be within Northfield to make sure that we're putting those buses as close to the kids who we know needed it most. We also did an analysis using some data that we got from families about their internet access. And we were able to map that using the Tableau data visualization software so that we could work with the local providers such as Charter, Northfield Wi-Fi to see which of the families in that data visualization map would be able to be served by Northfield Wi-Fi, because they are not always able to serve every family in the community. So that's a way that two really important programs we got up and going very quickly because of that data visualization software. And through some conversations with folks from that company, they published some articles about various successes that customers have had, and they had asked, could they do that story? And it's published, I believe, on their website or on their blog, and it's something that's available nationally. So we really believe in using data, as you all know, and the visualization of data is continuing to become something that is an incredibly powerful decision-making tool for us.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
Okay, Rob, questions or comments?
Yeah, I have one question, which is about, well, a lot of us are just kind of trying to get through the day or the week or the month at most. One of the kind of long-term things that goes on during a regular school day is the career and college readiness, which is kind of long-term thinking. And I'm wondering if any of that is going on so that students, while they're thinking about how do I get through this day, are also thinking about how do I plan out further than that.
Rob, I'm going to be straightforward. While I know that our high school specifically, has really committed, high school is really committed to making sure that we have a very strong career and college readiness approach. As you know, that when we are together regularly, we have a flex period in which once a week students have a career and college readiness cohort. We determined during this distance learning period, we were going to scale back on that because of the abrupt and the massive change to students. And we learned from last year when we had the 11 snow days and when we used our e-learning, which is obviously very different, right, than distance learning. You think it's the same, but it's very different. One of the pieces of feedback we got both from families and from students themselves were concerned about overwhelm. And even though we really focused on that, you've still seen the data shows that there is some overwhelm yet happening. So scaling that back at the high school in the short term is something that has happened. Now, at the middle school, we are teaching that career and college readiness skill set through our health classes. And so those students, depending on where they are at their curriculum, they're still getting that ramp up to readiness curriculum that's from the University of Minnesota that's embedded within our health courses. So we knew for our high school students, we could not ask too much of them too quickly, though we will be looking as we move forward. If we have to do distance learning as part of next year's calendar, how can we bring that back and continue to integrate it? So Rob, we just had to make some decisions about, it's not that students aren't getting some of those things, it's in a less formal way than what we have right now, or we have had in the past.
Okay, yeah, I think that's good. I think it's just important that as you're thinking about this moment, that you think there's something beyond this moment that you want to plan for, and just keep that in mind. And
yeah, we completely, in fact, that's part of during that last week of school, Rob, when we're going to bring our faculty get together to do that deep debrief. There's also going to be a second phase of that of people who have been really successful in distance learning, and almost a think tank kind of model with some of our staff to be able to look at how do we maintain those things that we have learned in this, but how could we also integrate some of the things that we had to let go as a result in the short term.
thanks.
Thank you, Rob. Ellen, question or comment?
Yes, I had a comment and then one question. So my comment is that thank you, like Amy said, for including the additional article that was on the Tableau website. What I was really impressed with, and not surprised that the district and Hope Langston had spearheaded this, was how it positioned us. I was thinking about Commissioner Ricker saying if some of this could look at the opportunities of the gap that we've been dealing with the students and learn something from it. And I was looking at this and the heat maps of identifying needs, and then in particular, we've had this one-to-one model and struggled with what's the Wi-Fi capabilities and the connectivity capabilities. And last year we had all the weather-related closures. And so I think looking at this data and thinking about how once we're past this crisis that we have more that we can do with it. So I just was really just kudos to the district, to Hope, to you, Dr. Hillman. So my one question had to do with the attendance data. And I was curious because in the years past, we've talked about how attendance is so critical and, to students succeeding and moving forward. And I didn't know how this compared. Obviously, the instruction is very different, but how does this attendance data compare to a similar time period?
Well, I'm happy that you asked that. I'll share my screen and show you. So this is a graph that we are looking at. This was looking at the early time frame here through April. Let me see if I've got a better one on this other. Let's see, I don't have that one. Okay. Nope, this is not. I'm going to show you a little bit as you see. Yeah, unfortunately, this is not the updated one. Let me see if I can. I don't think that it had it here. Okay, let's see. Nope. Ellen, I thought that I had that here, but I don't. This one was one of the original dashboards that we looked at, because you can see here it talked about this being the ACT testing day and a state tournament. And so unfortunately, again, this is how this year's compared basically up to distance learning, and that was just not refreshed. So I will get you that comparison. What I will tell you is that we know that the elementary data is showing that we have less absences than we normally do for all of the reasons that I shared before. So I apologize that that graph is not the one that is updated.
No, I hadn't thought of the question ahead of time, and it's just, and I know you're counting in some ways it might be apples and oranges. It's different type of instruction. You're counting attendance differently, but just because we've always focused on that as a really one measure to try to think about are we meeting all students' needs? I'd be curious. So I'm sorry I didn't think of it ahead of time. I regret that I didn't think of it ahead of time, but thank you.
This afternoon, I'll share one thing that I think will be an interesting anecdote to your question. this afternoon, we were having a discussion about some of the ways that our people have gone above and beyond to help students be successful. And we're considering actually inviting our staff to share some of the stories of what they've done to help make sure that students remain engaged. So I'm going to give you 2 examples. We have a middle school teacher who has learned that in one of her classes, well, in most of her classes, several students will hang on the Zoom afterwards for as long as she keeps it open. And so she's kept the practice of keeping it open. There are 4 or 5 students in the one class that stay every time. And she, did you guys need anything? No, we just want to talk to you. And so there's an example of students who are staying beyond the time that is needed because they want that connection with their teacher, right? And so to me, that's beyond attendance, right? That's about that desire to be there. We are also collecting these. We understand that there was one of our school administrators there was a student who was struggling with PE, made an appointment and stopped at that person's home and 25 feet apart, helped make sure that they finished whatever the assignment for PE that they needed to get done was, so that they could make sure that that got entered and put into the class. So those are just 2 examples of how people are going out of their way, to make sure that if we have students who are not engaging, what are we doing? In fact, we really believe that our high school multi-tiered system of support approach in this is among the best in the state. And we are going to be sharing that story because we've seen some really incredible results when we've had those personal connections. So I would share that with you in lieu of a graph on attendance, because I think those 2 stories are among dozens that I think are really powerful.
Thank you, Ellen. Jeff, questions or comments?
Thanks for everyone's work, staff, teachers, and parents. I wanted to bring out a couple of points. One is just kind of the idea of finishing strong, having some expectations out there across the board, Northfield strong, whatever SMART goals there is, because if there's anything, you kind of want to say, well, where should we be as a student as when I'm done with school, and maybe comment a little bit on our 4,000 kids and specifically, where we're at with the seniors. Final comment on that, because the next meeting we have is until May 26th. And then just maybe any comments you heard about activities and possibilities for the fall for the Minnesota State High School League.
Yeah, I'll comment on both of those. So one of the things that we have just recently finalized and worked through it with staff and have previewed it with parents just this evening is that thinking about, we have to think about grading differently in this environment, right? Because the traditional models of how we've assessed students aren't necessarily the same exact ways that we would do it face-to-face. And yet we've continued with some of those practices. So when our elementary families have a closing conference, it's going to be very much a discussion about their students' successes and areas that they can continue to work on, their grade level work in literacy. And so it'll be a little bit of a different way of assessing how those students have done, though. What I can tell you is that we know there's a lot of great engagement, at our elementary level. At our middle school and high school, we're following grading guidance from the Minnesota Department of Education that really emphasizes having a number of safety nets to ensure that students don't receive a grade that does not pass them. It's not that we have removed the ability for someone to get no credit, but we've taken some strategic actions to maintain a high level of expectation while also recognizing that this is not business as usual, right? If you remember our 7 distance learning principles, one of which is flexibility, and understand that this is not as distance, this is not business as usual. That's where the MTSS group comes in. So the MTSS group at both the middle school and high school, the high school had a little bit of a faster start with this than the middle school, but they are specific. We have a group of kids who are going to be doing great no matter what, right? I mean, regardless of the scenario. We also have some students who struggled before in the traditional face-to-face environment who are thriving in this environment. So that's great, right? Then we also have a group of students, many of who did struggle before in the face-to-face environment, plus some new students who are struggling in the digital environment, who we have to reach out and make sure, not that we're lowering the expectation, but we're raising the level of support to help students complete successfully the end of the year. School districts in Minnesota are doing this in a variety of different ways. We are already talking, Jeff, about what are the kinds of things that we can do next fall to be able to truly judge where students are at academically compared to where they were at the year before. We don't have an answer to that yet. We have some hypotheses, but really being strategic in how we make sure that there's a variety of safety nets for students, because no one has ever done this before. And we don't think that 16 and 17-year-olds should have the same exact consequences in this environment that they would have in a traditional environment. So it's a mix of that pressure and support, Jeff, to make sure those students are getting the services that they need. So maintaining a level of expectation while also adjusting what a specific grade means in terms of a numerical passing and things like that. As for the activities, as you know, I'm a member of the State High School League Regional Administrative Group, and we just had a meeting this past week reviewing this past school year and looking to the fall. There just is really no clarity yet about the fall. If we are planning the fall activities as if they are something that are going to go on, we've approved some of the locations for sectionals and things like that because we have to be prepared for that. But there's a lot of discussion about we do not know. And one of the things that we're trying to get better at, you know that we are planners, right? We're good planners. And one of the things we're having to get used to is having to be able to live with more real-time decision-making. So as we are following the lead of the State High School League and other state organizations regarding public health, those are some decisions I don't anticipate we're going to hear until early to maybe even just before the seasons might start. So you did see the next round of things. So for example, American Legion baseball is a Minnesota tradition, right? They've operated the state tournament for 70 some consecutive years. They announced this past week they will not be running a season this summer because of the uncertainty. So athletics is something, and all activities are things that we know that our students really value, and they're an important part of the educational process. We just like the beginning of next school year, we don't have any clarity yet, Jeff, on how those things are going to go. And frankly, I don't think we're going to get any until probably early August at best.
Thank you.
Noel, question or comments?
I was impressed with the number of meals that have been prepared and served and dispatched into the community, and reminded my friend who went to Africa as a missionary to build schools, to build two-room schools. And he met with the president of Tanzania, and he said, the most important thing we need is to put food on before our children. You can't educate the children if they're on an empty stomach. And so I think providing the meals is just an outstanding support of the education program that we need. And thank them for that.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Noel, because we talk a lot in education about two sociologists, psychologists, folks. One is Abraham Maslow, who talks about that before students are ready to learn, they have to have the basics. It's called Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You have to have the safety, you have to have food, before you can really be prepared to engage in education, we have to have those basic things taken care of. Then we also talk a lot about Bloom's taxonomy and how students learn. And so something that we have all been talking about in the last quarter has been, we have to have Maslow before we can really start to think about Bloom. And so thinking of that, those basic needs in turbulent times are so important. And we have really stepped to the plate as public schools. I think that if you think about, we've been one of the more effective units of government, over the last quarter, providing childcare, providing food service in a way that was a very quick pivot for us to be able to do that. And so while we've made mistakes, and of course we're not even close to perfect on these things, I really appreciate you sharing that, because we do have to make sure that kids have access to those basic necessities before we really can have access to be able to help them grow and learn academically.
Well, I think the district, in particular the food service, has done a 180 on everything.
Stephanie Stone has done an
They're not moving in the same direction that they were.
Correct.
And it's outstanding the way they have responded to the need and filled that need.
Thank you, Noel.
All right, thank you, board members. I just had one comment, well, a couple comments. I just appreciated the commitment to the data and to really analyzing the data. I appreciate that we survey, not just to survey, but to really learn and to analyze the data. And I just think it's really amazing that District Youth Council is continuing to remain engaged in the data. And I think about the data summit that was done, either was this past fall or early winter, and how successful that was, and taking the opportunity to build on that. And I know that those students bring a unique perspective, and their voice continues to be so valuable, particularly during this time in helping us with this. So I appreciate that. And I appreciate you talking about the connections that the staff are making with students. And that's why I'm really supportive of that modified schedule that last week of this school year, because I know that there are many students that need to be at that touch point with their teachers or administrators to finish up that work and really help them finish strong. And what an amazing way for the elementary parents to finish this school year, is to have that one-on-one conversation with their student and their teacher. And I just think that's really amazing. So I just give you a lot of credit for putting together that last 2 weeks of the calendar year, of the school year, and making it a really strong finish for the school year. So thank you for that.
Julie, we used feedback from parents. That was something that was in the surveys, and from talking with our teachers as well. Julie, I also want to point out, Tom used the raise hand feature in Zoom here. I think you may have one more comment.
Excellent. Tom.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Just a quick question. So there a lot of feedback from teachers, students, parents, whatever. Do the school administrators get together from around the state, or just in a local group and discuss what works for them, what doesn't, and so we can share ideas back and forth?
Absolutely, Tom. So actually, my Big 9 colleagues and I get together every other Friday. Right now, normally we gather once a month in normal times. We've been gathering twice a month now via Zoom, and this is a topic that is on every one of our meetings to talk about the successes and the challenges. And then we also have, for example, Hope Langston is part of a group called the Minnesota Assessment Group. They've been gathering to talk about how can we measure and how can we learn, from this. Our building principals at the high school level just last week had a meeting with the Southeast principals in the Southeast part of the state. So we are routinely talking with other school districts and learning from them what's been successful, sharing the things that we have had that have been successful, and we're all learning this together. Everybody's got a little bit of a different circumstance because we have so much local control overall in Minnesota, but we are absolutely sharing that information and that data.
Great.
Tom, thank you for using the raise hand feature. Okay, excellent, thank you. So we'll move on to our second item for discussion, which is the Cannon Valley Special Education Co-op, affectionately known as SEVSEC. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, so last meeting, we briefly talked about the Cannon Valley Special Education Cooperative. We talked about 2 items that were important for us to discuss. One of which was the disappointment that we have in that Executive Director Lynn Krominga, a longtime Northfield Public Schools employee, and the current Executive Director has accepted a position in Little Falls and will be moving at the end of the year. We have had a small but very quality pool of applicants. Our team from SEVSEC will be interviewing 3 qualified candidates on Wednesday. The representatives from Northfield will be myself, Amy Gerwitz, who is our representative on the SEVSEC board, and Cheryl Hall, our Director of Student Services. So we'll be engaging in those interviews this week. We have some very qualified candidates, and we'll be looking at if one of them is going to be the next director. I also want to share with you the next part of what I included in the packet is an item that looks very familiar to you because it is something I'm going to share on the screen here. So this should look quite familiar to you because this is a tax analysis from Ehlers. We've seen these before when we've done previous bonding. And as I mentioned to you the last time, we are looking at potentially, most likely actually, more than potentially, leasing a substantial portion of the Faribault West Mall. Currently what we have is, and I've got to make sure I get you, you can just give me one moment. I'm going to make sure I have the correct. So we're looking at leasing a portion of the Faribault West Mall, and make sure I've got the right one here. Okay, I apologize for that delay. And I'm going to show you now that document. Thanks for your patience with me. I had the wrong one queued up. So you've seen this document, the style of document before. We're looking at leasing for SEVSEC, a substantial portion of the Faribault West Mall. This is the Northfield Public Schools operating lease levy document. I think we had the incorrect one in the packet. We'll update that with you. So looking at currently the cooperative has 3 different locations in which we serve students. We have some students in the SUN program here at Laura Baker School. We have some students at the former Faribault School District offices, that's the STEP program, and then also at the Alexander Learning Academy that for a long time has served as a level 4 school for students with behavioral disabilities. For a long time it was Northfield and Faribault that shared that program, and of course now it's a SEVSEC based program. So as we look at this potential lease that we are looking to have you authorize at the next meeting, we'd be using our lease levy to be able to fund our portion of the leases, all 4 school districts, Medford, Northfield, Faribault, and Owatonna would. You'll see here on the residential homestead estimated market value, if we look at a home valued at $300,000, that would be a $9 per year increase for taxpayers at that level. So a very small, less than $1 a month for us to be able to put all of those different programs together. And so while this would be an increase in our lease levy, there would also be a corresponding reduction in operational costs. So all 4 school districts share in the operational costs. We share them proportionately to the number of students that we have in the program. And as we look at the ability to have greater operational efficiency, less administrative assistance, for example, more streamlined administrative team by moving to one building, while we'd be having this very modest increase in our lease levy that would be passed along to our property taxpayers, again, to the tune for a $300,000 home, $9 a year. We would also have a reduction in our operational costs, which would be helpful for all 4 districts in sharing those ongoing costs of operating the cooperative. And so I'm going to leave this on the screen right here as I take any questions that people have. We wouldn't be looking at moving into the newly renovated space until the fall of 2021. What I will tell you is they are considering continuing the lease with Laura Baker, but consolidating, that we're seeing fewer SUN students that we think can actually operate pretty well alongside our STEP students so that we can realize some of those operational efficiencies a little bit earlier. So I'd be happy to take any questions or comments that people have at this time. In our opinion, this is a good move for the cooperative toward continued sustainability. As you know, the cooperative is still fairly young, 4 and 5 years old when we've been thinking about this. We think this was one of the final things that Dr. Richardson finished just before he ended his superintendency. And so it's a fairly young cooperative. We're seeing some really positive results with our students in the program, but we think there can even be better results by moving them into a single location. Again, it would be in Faribault at the Faribault West Mall. So I will be happy to take any questions or thoughts that people have. I'm going to leave the screen where it is right now so that you have a chance to see that.
Excellent. Thank you, Dr. Hillman. Questions or comments? Tom?
No, I'll pass.
Amy?
All right, everyone. There you go. Pass. Okay.
Rob?
I have a question about transportation. Is the transportation of our students to SEVSEC paid for by our district, or is that shared cost of the cooperative?
So districts typically pay their own transportation for their own students. Now, again, special education transportation is nearly 100% reimbursed.
Okay, so it's not going to make a big difference that some students who are going to Northfield will now be going to Faribault for the SUN program.
That is correct.
Okay. And then the other question I had was about, I know that earlier we approved hiring the art specialists at Laura Baker to work with SEVSEC students in art and music. Would that continue if it were in Faribault entirely?
So Rob, I think they're still making some of the decisions on the staffing moving forward. one of the things I can tell you is that the art specialists have been incredibly powerful for our students. And so while there could be some efficiencies moving forward by having all of the students in one facility, we know that the art and music specialists are going to continue because they're providing an incredible service and something that's very useful for the students in those programs. So it may look a little different, and over time, some of that FTE may merge. But at this point, I do not see them where they are looking at necessarily changing that dramatically.
Thank you.
Ellen.
Yeah, so Mike, I had a question. So the handout that we had in our packet, I just assumed it had the wrong school name, but it sounds like it wasn't Northfield's.
It was
so,
incorrect, yes.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, and it sounds like each district's what the estimated tax increase and the levies is based. So the estimated tax increase is different depending on how many students that you have that are taking part in SubSec. Is that what I heard you say, Dr. Hillman?
That's on the operational cost
That's
side.
the operational side. Okay.
There is, again, there is a difference based upon a number of things with this. First of all, there's some part based upon our own taxable market value and our own local school tax base. And then there's also some pieces around how many students are participating as well.
So that there is something with the head count and what the levy is. It's not just on tax base. So
Correct.
so this, you would go into some sort of lease levy based on what your current situation is of numbers of students, and that could vary. So I just wasn't sure with something like this, how does that change over time?
So we are, it is possible, of course, lease levy can change anytime based upon the change in the market values. So we normally have that little bit of variability each year anyway. I think the key thing is that the cooperative is fairly full, and we have had a consistent number of students. I don't anticipate, based upon the sizes of our districts, that our count at SubSec is going to change all that much. We may go up a little bit and down, but not enough to where I think it's going to be a dramatic change in our share of the operational costs there. The data has been pretty consistent, with us being usually the third highest, the third of 4 in terms of number of students who are participating. And it's actually based, there's a couple of different, there's also a calculation that is based upon your December 1st special education child count. So it's not even just about the students who are participating, it's also about the share of the percentage of your school district special education students.
Okay, Jeff, questions or comments?
Yeah, just curious, Matt, you mentioned Faribault West Mall, that's over by Walmart. Wondering, can you comment on any square footage needs or where we're at with that and what section of that mall that might be in?
So one of the reasons that they really like that mall is it's the opportunity to really get a substantial amount of square footage there. I don't have that number with me right now, Jeff, in terms of what that total square footage is. However, what I can tell you, what they're really excited about that mall is that, first of all, there are some opportunities for the students to engage socially with some of those other businesses that are there. There's also a bus line that goes there, which allows, especially with the STEP students, the ability to transition to some of those life skills kinds of things that they're working on. There's a variety of advantages to the mall, plus the fact that it's, as you know, all malls are created to be reinvented. And so they feel they have a really high quality plan to be able to use the square footage that they have, that they are looking to have there, to be able to serve all 3 of these very different programs while making sure that they're reducing the operational costs or making it more efficient.
Thank you.
Noel, do you have any questions or comments?
I'll pass.
Okay. Thank you, board members, for great questions. And I just think it's really incredible work that's being done to think about how we can continue to be fiscally responsible, yet really do a great service for the students in this new space. I just wanted you to touch, Dr. Hillman, briefly on the impact Laura Baker having the SUN program vacate. You and I spoke about that, and I think it's important for the community to hear, you know, that Laura Baker and how this is not impacting them negatively by having the SUN program relocate to Faribault.
Yeah, we've loved the relationship that we've had with Laura Baker over the last several years. It's been an outstanding relationship. We're so grateful that we were able to. We remember, if you remember, when we went in and helped put the SevSec program at Laura Baker, they were preparing to close their own school that had been around for a long. In fact, they had been around for so long. They were the only school, to our knowledge, that were not governed by the Department of Education, one of the very few schools that were not governed by the Department of Education because of some of the things that go back in their history. So we were able to help keep that building that had been their school for the last several years. Plus, our lease really helped upgrade that facility. And so there are some real advantages that Laura Baker now has as a result of our being able to be in there for several years. It's been a very good location for us, but there are not as many students. When we started, there were a couple of residential students from Laura Baker who attended the SevSec program. That has lessened even further in the last few years. So there's not that tie to the facility that there once was. And in addition, we just have a smaller number of students. And if we can bring those students into a combined location, we're going to be able to operate and serve them more efficiently. So again, no heartache with the relationship with Laura Baker. It's been a great relationship. However, as the co-op continues to evolve, this is a good move. And yet I think that Laura Baker and their facility have really gotten a positive thing out of it over the last several years.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, we'll move on. Dr. Hillman is getting his vocal cord workout this evening because it is now an opportunity to do a financial update, and Dr. Hillman will provide that. I just wanted to remind board members that in the table file, there was a very comprehensive recap of the bills moving through the House and Senate. Some of them, most of them, coronavirus relief bills through the House and the Senate. That was a part of our table file. So if board members want to access that and review that as Dr. Hillman provides the update.
Yes, so what I included for you in the packet was the side-by-side comparison that you are all used to seeing from Schools for Equity in Education. And my real point of sharing some of this with you is you're going to see there is some funding relief that is in both the Senate and the House bill. And so we are still learning how those funds will be distributed and some very specific things that exist to be able to help make sure that we are able to, again, react to some of these financial pieces that I shared with you in the COVID-19 services update. But you'll see, as normal, we see things that are in the House bill but not in the Senate bill, and vice versa. So I shared this with you just so that you can see the range of things that are being considered by the legislature, because this obviously has not been a normal legislative session. They are also meeting in this teleconference format. The Senate is meeting in session some days with some very strategic social distancing happening. But my point of sharing this with you is just for you to show you the kinds of things that we are seeing from the state. And we're not seeing a lot of additional funding here, right? We're seeing flexibility. We're seeing things that allow us to be able to move from one fund to another, but we're not seeing a tremendous amount of additional dollars to cover some of the concerns that we have financially resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic. What I will also tell you, though, is that at the federal level, we are starting to see the CARES Act come through in terms of what we're thinking about we'll be receiving from some of that federal stimulus package. And so what we're looking at is we've seen some runs where, some financial analysis where they are looking to distribute a chunk of the CARES Act through the Title I allocation. So the higher your free and reduced lunch price count of your students, the more dollars you would receive. And then there's also some estimated sub-grant pieces that will be determined how they can be distributed at the state level. We've seen some initial numbers that I don't have confirmation on. In fact, we've heard after we got the numbers that there was the possibility that some of the guidance was changing. What we do know is we are going to get some dollars from the feds, which is going to be something that's going to be very helpful. And looking at some of the things that we've talked about in terms of the shortfall in child nutrition, the shortfall with the emergency child care worker program. You also know that we had a limited number of students that we did need to help with internet access. And so, we are paying for 50 T-Mobile hotspots. We've distributed 37 of them. We have 13 remaining we are still having students who are saying, geez, my internet got cut off because of some fiscal issues. Now I still need to have access. So we still have a small reserve of these hotspots, but that's just an example. Now, we were in very good shape compared to a lot of other districts. We did not have to purchase additional devices. We've seen that a lot of districts have to go out and purchase a number of Chromebooks or iPads to support students. We had very few students comparatively who did need to have internet access, and I've already described to you in detail the collaborative effort that we've had in the community to get to a point where we have all students who have access, and we're grateful to have this flexibility. Those are just some examples. We're also looking at long-term. If we have to continue with distance learning, how do we help these students who have had struggles getting internet access at their home before? How do we carry that forward, and what's the long-term fiscal piece with that? We know that all of these things that are coming from the state and the federal government are supposedly going to provide us some flexibility for supporting that kind of expense. The other part that I wanted to share with you, I've already shared with you about the emergency child care and the food service. Those are the short-term impacts, but we're also looking at the long-term financial impact. We know that we now understand that unemployment across the nation has reached the greatest threshold that it has since the Great Depression. You all saw that we had a Minnesota financial forecast presented last week at the state level that shows a $4 million turn from being a surplus to a deficit projected. And as you know, they normally only do financial forecasts in February and November, but they did a special one because of the current circumstance. So as we are looking forward, we are looking at the possibility, we were already looking at a priority-based budgeting process for the 2021-2022 school year. We've talked about that in Val Murdistorf's presentations this spring. We have been very fiscally responsible, but we can't outrun the lack of school funding over the last couple of decades. And our local voters have made up for that. They've been excellent. But we have been able to avoid a budget process for a priority-based budget process for some time. We also have called those reductions in the past. We had already planned that for the 2021-22 school year. All of those forecasts included a very conservative 1% increase from the state legislature on the per pupil basic formula. Nearly every analyst is saying to us, count on not getting anything additional on the formula, and that we need to consider that we're most likely back to the shifts. If you remember that, where we currently get the vast majority of our money in the year that it was generated, but those are always a small amount that they give to us the next year after all of the data has been counted out. And we've seen a variety of different shifts because the state government has a constitutional obligation to balance its budget. And one of the tools that they've used over the years is to delay payments to us at a greater percentage than they normally do. And so that's something that we're planning on as well. So I wanted just to share with you that happy news that we have to look forward to. I'm joking, of course, that's not happy news. We were already looking at having some issues with priority-based budgeting moving forward, like many other schools are, but everyone is now gearing up. A 0 and 0 on the formula makes a very big difference in our fiscal projections. So one thing I'm just going to talk with you about this evening, that there is I'm not asking anyone to vote on this at all, because it's actually not a policy. It's something that we have had as a practice over the years. You all know that we have been steadfast in our goal of having 16% of our annual expenditures in reserve. That's what we commonly refer to as our fund balance. And so that goes back to 2004 when Dr. Richardson came to the district, and we looked at those budget reductions at that point, and then looking at the fiscal health of the district, that 16% as our fund balance goal was an early warning system that if there were financial issues, we would have the time to be able to support and react to those accordingly. Now, you all also know that a 16% fund balance for a school district our size is an outlier. You know that our 16% goal is far higher than most other districts that are of similar size. One of the things I think that we're going to need to consider, and I've spoken with a number of people who I have great respect for their analysis of school finance and talk to them about our specific situation. Something I'm going to ask you to start thinking about is, this is a national fiscal crisis, unlike anything that we've seen in at least a decade, and probably even further back than that. And we know that there's going to be some issues at the state level for some time. So we're going to start looking at the possibility of making a recommendation to you that we would reduce our fund balance goal from 16% to something less than that. I wouldn't feel comfortable recommending anything less than 13% to you, frankly, in my initial thought process through this. With doing that in a temporary way to stave off having to have deeper reductions because of the additional challenge of the lack of state funding because of the coronavirus. And then promising that once we get through the initial stages of this, that we would go back to having a goal of 16%. And when I've talked with a number of my colleagues and very respected members of the field, one of the things that comes out is that's exactly why you have 16% fund balance. So when you have a crisis like this, that you have the ability to work through it by making some strategic reductions in that fund balance goal for a period of time, and then returning to making sure that your coffers are to 16% after that is over. Again, this is months and months away from when I would ask you to strongly consider this, but I wanted to share it with you as we're looking at a number of different ways that we can potentially try to weather the storm that's going to be ahead of us. So again, we've given you detailed pieces around a dashboard around the things that we are watching and considering. We've shared with you the concerns that we have in the short term for the child nutrition and the emergency child care workers. And we're also trying to give you that we're not just looking in the here and now, we are back to looking, making sure that the decisions that we're making have an understanding of their long-term impact. So we've committed to giving you some kind of financial update at each meeting. Tonight's more of a narrative update specific to the legislature, and I'd be happy to discuss this at this point as well.
Excellent, thank you. Board members, questions or comments? Tom?
Not really too much. I think it's a sort of a fluid situation at the state level and even at the federal. So I think you have a good plan and good thoughts on the fund balance. So just bide our time and hope for the best. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Amy?
So I'm glad you're looking forward like that and starting to figure out how it might work for the future. You know, ultimately, I think the 16% fund balance is a solid balance that we want to maintain, but money's no good, or I should say the value of money is in how you use it. So if it just gets put away and you never touch it, then it has little value. But if you can pull out the value to help us weather the storm and keep our programs going and stay on a stable footing, I think that's a very strong value for that fund balance in a temporary fashion.
Yeah, and to be really clear, the goal of potentially reducing that fund balance goal is so that we don't have to reduce as much as we will have to reduce for the 2021-22 school year. It's not that we will avoid, reductions, most likely. It is that it would try to help us limit the amount that we would have to make.
Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Rob?
Yeah, I was thinking about, as you think about making program-based reductions, a lot that's driven by obviously how much money you have, but because the unknown quantity in all of this is the virus. And one of the things that people have been talking about is that you might actually need to have smaller class sizes just to be safe in a classroom, which then has implications for the budget. So I'm just wondering if you started to think through some of those issues.
Yeah, there's a number of variables, Rob, that we're considering, and I'll highlight just a couple of them right now to share how we're thinking. we are considering and thinking about 5 or 6 different ways of coming back to school next fall, some of which involve a straight up distance learning, some of which I think we just don't know. Some of it would be coming back as if we are able to be back like normal. We know that those are 2 ends of the spectrum. We're also looking at some of the things that we've been seeing coming from people who study how you can reopen schools, looking at some things about what happens if we're required to do some kind of staggered schedule. A number of those, what happens if we do reopen in some way, shape, or fashion, and we have a substantial number of parents who are not yet comfortable sending their children back. Do we have to look at are we going to be required to look at some kind of hybrid model where some students have distance learning and others don't? We also have to face the fact that we have a number of employees who also may, because of their higher risk, qualify for some of the federal programming where they may be able to be on leave for a period of time. Although there's already a serious shortage of qualified and licensed teachers across the state. So those are just some of the variables in terms of a potential reduced student count, potential having to increase some staff because people may qualify for some of the federal unemployment programs or the federal leave programs that can support them for a period of time, especially if they qualify for having a higher risk health condition. Those are just the few of the things that we have started to write down. In fact, I wrote an email to Deb Griffiths from Schools for Equity that most of you know, and she was asking, what are we thinking about? And I gave her a list of all the things. What happens with transportation? What happens with, if we do come back, we will most likely need to do some kind of health screening. What's the level of health screening that we need to do? And is there a need for either redeploying people, or how will we do that if it comes to that case? So I'm not saying any one of these things or if any of them at all will come true, but as we're looking at how schools across the globe are trying to reopen, these are some of the things that we're seeing them do. So those are all the different things we're trying to model out. Frankly, we're just trying to both get this year, the plane landed for this year, while also looking at some of those longer term things. So I share those examples, Rob, as just a few of the variables that we are thinking about how we will need to do it when we reopen schools at some point here in the future.
And it seems like each of those different scenarios, there's going to be a different cost for them. So it seems like it's hard to budget for either all distance learning or having a staggered schedule, or, if you can only have people sitting 6 feet apart in a classroom, that obviously means smaller class sizes, which means you have to stagger. So all of these things are going to affect how you budget to make them happen.
Well, and as you know, when we adopted our budget in early April, or in April, one of the things that we discussed was that we anticipated having a few revised budgets next year, because remember, a budget is a guide. And so we normally at least do one revised budget every year in December. I can be fairly confident in saying we will be doing more than one revised budget next year. And there is so much uncertainty, and the way that our current system works, by law, there are certain things that we have to make decisions on before June 30th, right? And so no one is going to have any kind of idea what this is going to look like before June 30th. So some of us were on a call with the School Boards Association today and Commissioner Ricker, and even talking about some of those kinds of things. Some of us in the chat, there were some questions about that. So we are trying to plan the best that we can for next year, knowing that we don't have any idea of how it's going to shake out. But the approach that we're using is we are trying to consider each of these different options that I shared, and we're doing some initial bullet pointing. What if it looks like we're trending toward this option, what are the things that we immediately need to look at from a financial perspective to make sure we can support that? It's really trying to pregame, if you will, a little bit of planning for a variety of different circumstances. And so I suppose you could look at it as if we don't know which pitcher we're going to face on the other team, we have a variety of lineups based upon who they are going to throw against us. And we are trying to play those out while not getting too deep into them, because you can't go too far into it either, because we don't have certainty. And again, I don't think we're going to have certainty until mid-August is my prediction, based on what I'm reading and hearing from folks at the state.
Well, thanks. I appreciate your flexibility and your creativity, and also that the safety of students and employees is the most important thing. So whatever we have to do to make that the top goal, I think that's what we will end up planning for.
Thanks, Rob.
Ellen.
I just echo, as you're live with real-time decision making, appreciate you raising the unbalance with us, that you're not.
We lost you just a little bit there, Ellen.
Oh, just thank you for raising this early.
You bet. Our pleasure.
Jeff.
Yeah, I think first of all, a couple of good things. We've done a good job with the 16%. If that needs to go down, that's our rainy day fund, and we've got to take what we can out of that and bring that down. But also, you look at the state, and here it is, amazing in a short period of time where it went to a 1.5 billion surplus to a negative of 2.5 and counting. So it's a matter of seeing what's going to happen and just being able to so many variables, incredible amount of variables. And the nice thing is it's the part of the year that this happened in, you can have the summer to adjust and do some good planning.
Thanks, Jeff.
Noel.
Dr. Hillman, excellent job in trying to forecast the options. We got a lot of options that we have to consider, and thank you for being on top of it.
Excellent. Thank you. Yes, and thank you for making the financial update the standard part of our agenda as we move forward. We know there are a lot of moving parts and incredible challenges ahead, but it's good to be able to have an update at every one of our meetings. So that concludes our items for discussion and report this evening. So we can move on to approval of the consent agenda. I have just two comments. One, there were a few personnel items in the table file that were part of the consent agenda. And there's one note, the April 27th board meeting minutes does not indicate on there that it was a teleconference meeting. So that change will take place after the approval of the consent grouping. So is there anything anyone would like to pull from the consent grouping for separate consideration? Okay, is there a motion to approve the consent grouping?
Moved. So moved.
Moved by Tom. Is there a second?
Second by Rob.
Second by Rob. Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. We'll conduct a roll call vote. Anita?
Broniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Cornell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Excellent. Motion carries. So we will move on now to items for individual action. The first item is the stormwater maintenance agreement for Greenville Park Elementary that was presented at our April 27th board meeting. So is there a motion to approve the stormwater maintenance agreement for Greenville Park Elementary School as presented?
Moved by Tom.
Moved by Tom. Is there a second?
Second by Amy.
Second by Amy. Thank you. We have a motion and a second. I will go through the roll call for any questions or comments board members have on this item. If you have none, you can just simply say pass. Tom?
Pass.
Amy?
Pass.
Rob?
Pass.
Ellen?
Pass.
Jeff?
Pass.
Noel?
Pass.
Okay. Excellent, thank you. We will now conduct a roll call vote to approve the stormwater maintenance agreement for Greenville Park Elementary School. Anita?
Broniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Excellent. Motion carries. Our second item for individual action is approval of board policies 414, 419, and 421 that were initially presented at our last board meeting on April 27th, 2020. So is there a motion to approve the changes to policies as presented?
Motion.
Moved by Jeff. Is there a second?
Second by Rob.
Second by Rob. We have a motion and a second. I will run through board members if you have any questions or comments. Tom,
Pass.
Amy,
Pass.
Rob,
Pass.
Ellen,
Pass.
Jeff,
Pass.
Noel.
Pass.
Excellent. So we have a motion and a second. No questions or comments. So we will move to a roll call vote. Anita?
Broniak,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon,
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. That does take care of items for individual action. So we will go on now to items for information. Our first item is the enrollment report for May of 2020 that was in your packets. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, and so you'll see that when we look from April to May, or excuse me, from April to May, our enrollment report, you're going to see that we're down about 20 students. And I think that some of you would appropriately ask, well, how does that happen? So there's two factors that have gone into that. Number one, what we see this time of year is, as you know, our area learning center has students who are on a shorter number of grading periods than we have at our traditional high school. So they have 8 grading periods at the ALC as opposed to 4. And at this time of the year, they do have a number of seniors who are eligible to graduate after some of those shorter grading periods. So the area learning center number has gone down because of students who have graduated there. What we also know is affected at the high school is that the move of this, the exchange students who we had had through Rotary, who had been here for most of the year, of course, had gone home early due to the coronavirus. That impacted as well. We actually did have a couple of students who moved. So we normally, that's a drop of 20 students overall. I wanted just to explain where the two areas that we saw the most movement and how those came about.
Excellent, thank you. I will run through quickly in case board members have any questions on the enrollment report. Tom?
Pass.
Amy?
Pass.
Rob?
Pass.
Ellen?
Pass.
Jeff?
Pass.
Noel?
Pass.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on now to the construction update. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, and for the most part, our construction continues unabated. I want to congratulate and thank our Greenville Park staff members. Over the last couple of weeks, we've had a rotation where once we knew that we were going to be in distance learning for the remainder of the school year, Sam Richardson, building principal, Director of Buildings and Grounds, Jim Kulseth, Director of Community Education, Aaron Bailey, all came up with a plan to rotate staff members in strategically over the period of 2 weeks to be able to clean their classrooms and put items away into the gymnasium so that the renovation of that facility could begin. I know that our early childhood staff today toured the building to look at remaining furniture and what furniture they would like to keep. And so that process is undergoing. Tomorrow afternoon, we also, after the early childhood staff has had a chance to take a look at the surplus furniture that would remain. We have several nonprofits in accordance with our policy who are going to be able to come through and potentially receive some furniture from the current Greenville Park building as a donation. And then some of it will have to be disposed of as we move ahead. I also understand they actually started some of the initial renovation portions today. So that was a lot of effort on top of distance learning by our Greenville Park staff. As always, they stepped forward professionally. They got the job done. And for many people, it's a very sad time for them because we have many people who've taught for 30 plus years in that building and had looked forward to a real closure to that facility that we had planned throughout the spring. And unfortunately, that's just another casualty of the coronavirus. So I really want to compliment Sam and Jim and Aaron and the work that they did to so quickly get that building prepared. So we can really have, if you think about it, it's going to be almost 3 additional weeks than what we thought to be able to complete that renovation. And the Greenville Park, or the new Community Education Center, that was our tightest time frame on construction. So congratulations to the staff for getting that together. And I want to honor the fact that, you know, there was some disappointment there in not being able to have some of those end of the year activities that people had worked so hard to plan to give that building an appropriate change of function, if you will. In the document, I also linked, we have 3 new sets of drone footage. I'm not going to try to play the drone footage through the Zoom meeting because I've had intermittent success with playing those kinds of videos. And I know that you have the links. They're also live on our construction website. So you'll see that there's a drone overview of Greenville Park from the new Greenville Park building from April. There's also one from Sibley. That's a pretty short one. There's also a really cool one that stitches together the several different drone flights that Knutson Construction has done at the Greenville Park site since last September. And so if you, the links are listed in the board packet, or you can also go to the construction updates website, northfieldschools.org/construction. You can see the links right there, along with several of the other really cool little video features that Knutson and Wold have helped us put together. So wanted to share that with you. And then I did want to share with you probably one of the very few glitches that we have had in our AV, or our bidding process. So our final bid was for the district-wide audio visual equipment and installation. So these are things like classroom projectors, the PA system at Greenville Park, that kind of thing in terms of at Sibley and at the Greenville Park plan. So we did do the bid opening on April 28th, and we had bids come in at approximately $90,000 under budget. We had hoped to have that bid for you here tonight. However, we are still currently validating the low bidder's ability to meet all of the requirement of the specs to perform the scope of work. Now, what I want to share with you is I don't believe we will need to have a special meeting to approve that bid. We will hopefully be able to bring that to the May 26th meeting, but we're wanting to make sure all of that stuff can be ordered so we don't have any delay. We don't have any inclination at this point that any of that equipment would be delayed. But as we finalize that scope of work and we finalize the low bidder's ability to meet all of those requirements, it is possible I may have to ask you to do a very short special meeting to accept the bid for that, for the AV project. So that's your construction update.
Thank you, Matt.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hillman, I think you were possibly going to do a brief update on the roundabout.
Yes, I'm happy that you brought that up, Julie. So we know you've seen out there that the rock house has made its way off of the corner that it has sat for decades. You'll also notice that our part of the roundabout, Gleason local contractor, helped us fill in all of that area that was on the school property. There was actually an old cistern there and some other, it was a septic tank actually, and some other things that needed to be taken care of. Those things were taken care of. You're going to notice that you're seeing some heavier equipment at that corner of Jefferson and Division. Tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday, we were just notified today that that intersection at Jefferson and Division is going to be closed. There's one of the utility vendors that has some major rerouting that they need to do. And so they are closing that intersection tomorrow, Wednesday, and Thursday. And then you'll expect to start to see some additional equipment arrive. We don't yet know what the date is for a longer term closure for that intersection. We know that they were trying to accelerate the process since there's a less traffic there now with school not being in formal session on site through the remainder of the school year. But we know they're closing it the next couple of days, and we're continuing to get updates. Jim Colseth is meeting routinely with the city. Things appear to be progressing as they should. We are still anticipating there's the possibility of that intersection being not available until after the school year begins next year. So those are the things that we know. They're working really hard right now to reroute those utilities. I believe it's CenturyLink this week that really has some work that they need to finish up because they have a lot of cabling that needs to be rerouted because of where the roundabout is going through. So I want to compliment the city has been very good at keeping us involved and in the loop. been some really great communication about it. And so we're really grateful that this project is going to get done after years and years of discussion, but we're just at the beginning.
Excellent, thank you. Again, I will run through board members if you have any questions or comments on the construction update. Tom?
Yeah, I think in the last meeting you said things like whiteboards were maybe a little behind. Are there other supplies or any other issues like that?
As of now, that's the only update I have, Tom, of any of the equipment for the new building that they are concerned about at this point. With the one that we don't know yet, because we're still getting some of that process going, is Longfellow, right? Of course, that's not scheduled. We're not scheduled to move there until district offices until January of 2021. But right now, that's the whiteboards are the only pieces that I have been told that that factory has shut down, and that it could be, those potentially could be behind, though my understanding is they can also ramp up pretty quickly as well.
Amy?
No questions. I'm just excited that everything's proceeding apace. Thanks for staying on top of that, as well as when you're trying to do all the distant learning stuff at the same time. It's been a big year for you.
Well, and we just really want to put credit where credit is due. We are incredibly fortunate to have Jim Kulseth, our Director of Buildings and Grounds. Jim has really taken a lot of the point person on the work with the construction company. We have a lot of, we have our project oversight committee, and we are talking with folks regularly, but Jim is really doing a lot of that work. And we also have to give Knutson a tremendous amount of credit. When we hired them as the construction management firm, they have delivered beyond what I had expected from them. And so they have an excellent staff who are very communicative. So we're very fortunate. Those are the people who really deserve the thanks.
Rob?
I was just going to add that on Thursday, we have a meeting of the Public Art Review Committee for the murals that will go into the tunnel. So we'll start looking at artist submissions for art for those tunnels. And I heard that the tunnels themselves, which are manufactured off-site, prefabricated off-site, and then brought in, have actually been constructed. So they'll be able to bring those in and just piece them together, and then art will go into them. So that's pretty exciting.
Thanks, Rob.
That's really exciting. Thanks for that update. Ellen? I don't know if Ellen's continuing to.
No question.
Okay, thanks, Ellen. Jeff?
Just to comment on the roundabout, when is actual construction on that going to start, and then when is it proposed to be completed?
Yeah, they are looking that construction was originally supposed to start right around the end of school, right near the end of school. They were looking to shut the intersection right after June 5th. We're hoping that they're able to start that construction a little bit earlier. One of the big things was to get the utility portion done. So we will know a little bit more after these utilities get moved, if they will actually be able to begin the more formal construction and shut that intersection down more permanently, or for the next several months to get that work done, I think in the next week or so. Hopefully they can start that early, because if they can start it earlier, it should end earlier, right? So that is what the goal is. And we tried to, again, the city's been very workable to try to say, yes, we'll get this going as quickly as we can. But you know, when you already have a schedule, sometimes it's easy to accelerate. For example, the Greenville Park renovation, the contractors all wanted to accelerate that. This is a little bit of a different project. And so I know the city was working really hard to try to accelerate and get that start date even sooner, because we were trying to tie that to the end of the school year so we could do the best we could to minimize traffic disruption. There was some possibility that traffic would be disrupted even before the end of the school year. In the previous plan, hopefully they are going to be able to get that going a little bit more quickly.
And an obvious follow-up question is, when that shut down, I mean, traffic diverted, do you see a big pushback or anybody, I mean, Raider Drive and using our own thing to walk through, or drive through our own parking lot, is that going to be a big problem, or is that a solution?
So the city does have a set of detours to be able to get to our school buildings. They've already provided those for us. They are also looking at the other detours, obviously, that's a major intersection. I've seen some of the initial maps for those detours. I do think that, as with all construction projects, there will be some frustration from those of us. I happen to live in that area and I drive, every day to work. My commute will be different, as everyone's will. The good news about this, Jeff, is that if there's anything that's come out of the coronavirus closure or the distance learning period, is that we've reduced the amount of people who are using that intersection. So hopefully that will limit some of that frustration. But we all know, all of us have frustration with Minnesota construction projects, right? It's either winter or road construction season. So I think that there certainly will be some frustration. However, we do have a number of detours. We are also talking with the police about avoiding having our parking lots become basically kind of cut throughs. So specifically at Bridgewater, we're looking at some strategies so that we're not having a tremendous amount of, if we do have on-site summer programming, any kind of childcare in the summer, it will have to be at Bridgewater, right? Because Sibley and Greenville Park are both having renovations and the new building's not done yet. So we want to try to limit the traffic of people who would be trying to use our parking lots as a shortcut. So we've been working with the city of Northfield and the police department about how we can, some strategies that we can use to really limit that.
Noel, do you have any questions or comments on the construction update?
I only have a question for Rob. You talked about murals in the tunnels. Bear with me for a moment. My senior project at South Dakota State was to put a 40-foot mural, 8 feet high, in the tunnel. And we finished it on Friday, and the tunnel filled half full of water on Saturday. So the lower half of the mural was completely destroyed. The question is there any chances that the water in those tunnels, that there may be water in those tunnels and the mural should be high enough to not be a problem? I don't think Dr. Hillman can answer that, but it's maybe a question that should be put out to Jim.
Yeah, I think that, they're raising the grade of the whole thing, so that I think the drainage is part of the reason that they're raising the whole grade of the roundabout, so that it won't be in the flooding area.
Right. That was true at South Dakota State too, but what happened is that the power went out and the sump pumps didn't work. So we had a flood problem, and it lasted for about 6 hours, but that was enough time to damage all the work that we put in.
Yeah. One of the people on the Public Art Review Committee is Dave Bennett, the city engineer. So I think he's probably considering those problems.
Good, thank you. No other questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our last item for information, which is graduation. And Dr. Hillman is going to review graduation plans for the class of 2020. Dr. Hillman.
Yes, thank you. So I just want to walk through a few things. We had a brief discussion on this the last meeting, and I just want to share, we've made some difficult decisions in the last week about how we're going to conduct commencement during COVID-19. And our approach is in direct alignment with the guidance provided by the Minnesota Departments of Health and Education this past Friday. And before I get into the details of what the current plans are, I really want to just start by acknowledging that there's been tremendous disappointment and frustration and frankly, a lot of anger, shared by some of the class of 2020 students and their parents. Very understandable. Our entire staff has been disheartened about how the final quarter of our senior school career was disrupted by COVID-19. Commencement every year, we know it's a special time for our school staff and for our board members. These are some of our favorite events of the year because, we take such pride in helping students get to this point and see the joy that they and their families experience when we get to commencement. And, I've said this to you and to the community many times, either through writing or on KYMN, that, we're going to get through the pandemic together as a community. And I do want to share with the class of 2020 and their families how sorry we are, that they cannot enjoy these rites of passage in the traditional ways. And as we know, the guidance from the state departments of health and education was pretty restrictive, and our plan really aligns with what those folks have recommended and directed school districts to do. And so both the Area Learning Center and Northfield High School graduations are going to be video streamed in a virtual graduation ceremony. We are working with Nuger Communications to produce the Northfield High School video. That's going to be live streamed on May 31st at 2 o'clock. The Area Learning Center, because of course they have so many fewer students who graduate and a different approach to graduation commencement, they're producing their own virtual graduation video, and that will be aired at 6 p.m. on June 5th. And so with both of those, a little bit different, but those are the dates that they are going to be, that the plan is for those to be commenced. And what I also want to share is that the plan is going to be, commencement is just one activity within the last quarter of the school year for our students. And so what we're going to also be having for students is that they're going to be able to, for the high school students on May 28th and 29th, they're going to be picking up a special 2020 class of 2020 canvas bag that is being produced locally at Larson's Printing. It's going to include a number of different things: a class of 2020 t-shirt, academic awards, activities, yearbooks, their cap and gown. That's scheduled for May 28th and 29th. And then on the day of commencement, we are also planning to have, after the ceremony is finished, students are able to come to campus and pick up their diploma. We are working with some families who have asked if they could get their diploma prior to that, maybe during the Canvas tote pickup. We're considering a number of different options. Now that we have the actual guidance from the state, we are just looking at any other options we have for the delivery of diplomas in terms of between students picking them up on the 28th or 29th, also looking at how that distribution can happen safely on the 31st. The Area Learning Center will have their distribution on June 4th and 5th of their diplomas. So there's also a number of other things that are going to happen. With Nuger helping us with the Northfield High School online ceremony, we are going to be doing our best. Weather hopefully will help us to record the speeches that we normally would have from Memorial Field itself, so that when we do live stream that online ceremony, that we have some of what the normal kind of part of commencement would be. And we're also looking to, of course, present the class, read all of the names, and there's some other special features that we're looking at to try to make this as special as we possibly can, given the fact that we can't have the normal, tremendously joyful celebration. You'll also notice that there's quite a few other events that are going on. So Mr. Lear sent information to high school seniors and their families on Friday night, talking about the variety of different activities. So we are having a virtual senior academic award and scholarship distribution on May 26th. They're planning to present over $60,000 in scholarships sponsored by community members and business entities. We are also working with Jostens. Jostens is, of course, our yearbook provider. They are working on a special digital yearbook signing platform, and more information is going to be coming from Jostens. This hopefully fills that gap of not being able to be with each other and signing yearbooks. My understanding is that students are going to be able to sign those yearbooks digitally, and that they will be able to print something that they'll be able to include with their yearbook. For people who have had past graduates, you know that we do not allow typically students to decorate their graduation cap. This is a one-time only. We're going to allow that, and we're going to actually have a contest for creativity about how students have decorated that cap. And we're going to have a panel of unbiased judges who will be able to evaluate work. And we have some private donors who are offering some chamber bucks so that students will be able to get some reward for their creativity. Wednesday, May 27th, the annual Maroon and Gold banquet, of course, will be different, but we're still going to be doing that, and that will be brought to people online as well. We also have a virtual lock-in and prize giveaway. Of course, you know that lock-in is a very celebratory time for our seniors as well. We're not just abandoning that. Mr. Lear is working on a way to be able to have that virtual lock-in with some of the festive nature that they would have in person. Of course, it can't be the same. There's just no way. But also there's a number of prizes that are also given to seniors on that evening as well. Mr. Lear is still working on that with his staff. And then one of the final things that we have so far is a special reunion that we are prepared to host for the class of 2020. So we had originally announced that we would have that in the spring of 2021. That's most likely when it will happen, but we've modified our language just to say that as soon as public health guidelines permit and that we're able to provide enough notice for our graduates to attend. And we're really working on how that reunion would look. We'd look at giving students access to the building. One of the things we've heard is this real disappointment in not being able to be in the building one last time. Some disappointment in not being able to eat their last meal at their school. The disappointment of not being able to be with their teachers. That reunion will be an attempt to try to fill that gap, that the loss that we can't recreate right now, but that we would offer that opportunity during this special reunion. We don't do reunions for other classes. We are not usually involved in reunions, but this is something that we felt strongly about. The feedback that we got from people was that they really wanted to have that collective experience. And this is one of the ways that we're looking to do that. In addition, we have had some requests to look at, for those people who have an interest, could we hold a commemorative opportunity for students to walk across the stage and hear their names read. That is something we're investigating and committed to trying to do, so that even though we can't have that traditional piece right now, we are looking to make that part of the reunion when we are able to have that. So what I want to share with you is there is no way that any of these things can come close to the joy of regular commencement. And we know that there are so many things this spring that have been disrupted. Final spring sports seasons, things like prom and some of these other events that we are trying to replicate online. And what I just want the board and the community to know is we love these kids. I mean, that's why we come to work every day, is because we are in it for making sure that we are bettering our nation by sending off the next wave of graduates. And we so look forward to that graduation ceremony, that commencement ceremony. And we are so disheartened that we can't provide it in the normal way. And then some of the other creative ways that people had been thinking about doing this, there are just many of those that are not possible right now with the Department of Education, Department of Health guidance. So we are taking that guidance, and we are making sure that if there's any minor adjustments we can make to our plan. Frankly, our plan was right in line with what the directives from the state that came out on Friday. And so I do want to acknowledge the hurt that people are experiencing. I'm a dad of 3. I understand how important that day is to folks. And I want to share our sorrow for the class of 2020 that we can't have it in the regular way. But I also think that some of these events are going to lead to memories that no one else is going to have. No other class, hopefully, no other class is going to have. And so these are good faith efforts to try to say how we can celebrate with this class in a different way. So I share that with you. We'll continue to update seniors and their parents over the next few weeks. And I want to thank people for the feedback that they provided, both supportive feedback and ideas and the feedback that has been critical. We welcome all feedback because we think it's important. We take all of it and we look at how can we use it to improve what we're doing. So that's the report on commencement at this point, and I'd be happy to take any questions that people have about it as well.
Excellent, thank you. Tom.
As the only one with, as the only parent of a graduating senior on the board, I'm impressed that you can pull off all these details of getting the diplomas and the bags to the right people and everything, and in the 2 weeks you have remaining, and everything has to come together. So thanks for that. I'm also one of those parents who probably nagged you a bit about ideas or just disappointment. And I know there are other things that some Facebook groups are instituting, like the Adopt a Student or whatever. So I agree. It'll be as Wallace would often say to Gromit, it's one for the album. So thanks for all the effort you're putting into it.
Thank you, Tom. Amy.
So I just want to say 2 things. First, I think the community really supports all of these students. I think we all have a sense of the disappointments that they're going through, and People that I talk with, you know, that's a very common question about what about the seniors? And I think there's a lot of emotional support out there in the community. Also, I just wanted to say, since the board is usually involved in graduation somehow, and I know Julie's going to be giving a speech, but if there's any way or following public health guidelines that I could be involved, or maybe other people on the board might be interested, even if it's just sitting in a chair on the stage while they're, you know, to make it look more like a graduation, whatever that might be, I would certainly be open to helping in the effort to try to make it as traditional but different at the same time.
And Amy, I think there are three ways that board members, two or three ways that board members could assist us in this process. Number one is you typically hand out diplomas. So I think that with what we know with the and I don't like the term, but it's the term that is being used in our society for a variety of things, you know, with the ability for people to come and get their diplomas curbside. If board members have an interest in participating in that process, there will be some very strict pieces that will include some health screening and masks and things like that. But that is something, if board members have an interest in taking a shift during that, we'd be happy to help you with that. The same kind of thing with the bag distribution. That would be another opportunity for board members to help distribute, trying to mimic what you have typically done during those kinds of things. And then in addition, we have a couple of other ideas that we have about some additional kind of video opportunities that the board and some other local dignitaries could be invited to provide some advice for the class moving forward. So we're trying to look at some other ways, but those are the two right off the bat that I know if people have an interest in, that we would certainly welcome your assistance. It will not be the same, right, as we typically, but we are looking at ways to have you involved as well.
And personally, I'm happy to help whatever way you would find helpful. So just sign me up and let me know.
I will pass that along to Mr. Lear and the high school team. You know, they really manage the graduation ceremony, and so I'll make sure that they know that there's an interest in help for both of those.
Thank you.
Rob.
I have nothing other than to say thank you for all your efforts and what you've been able to put together under these difficult circumstances.
Ellen.
Nope, no other comments.
Jeff.
Yes, congratulations to the class of 2020 and for joining me and thousands of others as alumni of the Northfield schools. And I want to say that there's the number one thing that I love about my 10 years on the board is going to commencement. So it's a loss for us too. So thank you.
Noel.
I'm going to pass on this one.
Okay. Well, thank you for that update. And I think that I appreciate board members and particularly Dr. Hillman really articulating all of our feelings around the disappointment that we feel and how incredibly sorry we are that the coronavirus is really impacting our young people in such a dramatic way, and appreciate all of the efforts that the community, the parents, and particularly the high school administrators are putting forth to try to make this as special as it can be. And I appreciate the position the district took initially in managing the expectations of our seniors and their families in terms of really taking our time to make that decision and really paying attention to what Governor Walz has been saying for quite a few weeks. I think he did a masterful job of managing expectations in terms of what he saw coming forward and the decisions that he ultimately saw as the way things were trending. And so I appreciate that the district took that same position in managing the expectations and really being careful to not get too far ahead of where we had to ultimately decide, because it was an incredibly tough decision. And I think waiting until all the information was there, I appreciate Dr. Hillman, who's always so planful and so proactive to understanding the new stance of sometimes it's game time decision, and we have to live within a tighter time frame, which I think leads to really informed decisions, but it also makes it that much more difficult to ultimately implement whatever the decision is. So I just appreciate that. I think that as parents of seniors and seniors themselves, this is an incredibly difficult time, and hope that they do feel the support of the board and really the entire community, and in hoping that we can give them something that will not be the same, but will nonetheless be memorable. So we appreciate all the work that's being done, and we look forward to hearing as more things evolve. But the current schedule is just really impressive, I think, for what we're able to do in light of the constraints that we have.
And we are continuing to look for other ways as that are within the guidelines that we can, continue to make this a special. It is not business as usual. So I also reiterate what Julie has said, that we really thank, everyone, the community, the parents, the students who are, continuing to try to make sure that we can make this the best of the worst circumstances.
Okay, excellent. So that takes care of items for information. Future meetings. Our next meeting is Tuesday, May 26th. Again, that is a Tuesday, Monday being the Memorial Day observance. We will make some decisions in the next few days about the format for that meeting. We'll take some guidance from Governor Walz as the May 18th stay-at-home order is scheduled to expire. So following that, we'll make some decisions around the Tuesday, May 26th meeting, whether it be a teleconference or maybe potentially some board members being at the actual Northfield High School Media Center regular board meeting site, or how we will do that, maybe a hybrid. So we will keep you posted on that. We would then roll into June, Monday, June 8th. And then with only one board meeting in June, we would move it then to Monday, July 13th. So those are the 3 regularly scheduled board meetings as they are shaping up. And we will keep you posted as well if there's a potential for any special board meeting that board members have been so gracious to offer the opportunity for us to potentially have to approve the bid for the audio portion of the construction project. So we will give everyone adequate notice, obviously, on that if that were to occur. So thank you again for a great meeting. We do sincerely look forward, I know, to a time when we can all be together again. In the meantime, everyone take care and stay well. With that, I ask for a motion to adjourn.
Julie?
Oh, yes, Noel.
Before we adjourn, I've been reflecting on the past meetings and on this meeting, and want to say there are so many behind the scenes people that make this district work. And there's 9 people on the screen besides myself. And I'm honored to serve with this blue ribbon board. And I really appreciate the work that you do, the leadership of Julie, the leadership of Dr. Hillman, and so many other people, and the decisions that the board made. I'm proud to be a part of the team. So with that, I'd adjourn. Oh, it's already been adjourned.
All right, no. With that, Noel has moved to adjourn. Is there a second?
No, Amy adjourned the meeting.
Okay, so there's a motion by Noel, a second by Amy. I will ask for a roll call vote to adjourn. Anita?
Grania,
Aye.
Gerwitz,
Aye.
Hardy,
Aye.
Iverson,
Aye.
Pritchard,
Aye.
Quinnell,
Aye.
Stratmon.
Sure.
Okay, excellent. Motion carries. We are adjourned.